After a school shooting in Minnesota yesterday, the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, attacked people of faith for offering their thoughts and prayers for the victims. Your city has a school shooting, a Catholic school shooting. 2 children are dead, others are wounded, and you think this is a good time to show your disdain for religion? What would you like to say to the mayor of Minneapolis? 617-266-6868 is the number here. 617-266-6868. The shooting happened yesterday morning. Oh, in case you were unaware, I am Sandy Shack, filling in for Jeff Kuhner, who is going to be back after Labor Day. The shooting happened yesterday morning at the Annunciation Catholic Church. The children were in Mass, marking the first week of school. The shooter, who had a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, began firing through the church windows from outside. 2 children, 8 and 10 years old, are dead. 17 others are injured, including 14 of them kids. 2 of the children are in critical condition. Police found a slew of other terrified children hiding throughout the building. It was heart-wrenching. The whole thing was heart-wrenching. Police Chief Byron O'Hara at first said that they would investigate the motive of why this occurred. Cut 404, please, Mike. We have this, the
question was, what can be said about the shooter? We believe it is one suspect, a sole shooter. We believe he is deceased. He is in his early 20s, does not have an extensive known criminal history, and we are looking through information left behind to try and determine some type of motive.
Some type of motive. And when they did examine and investigate who the shooter was, they discovered that the bleep who did this to innocent children and others who were praying was none other than Robin Westman, who is a transgender woman whose mother worked at the school where 2 children, were slaughtered, basically. Westman had previously been known as Robert, having petitioned to have her name changed in 2019, which apparently her mom had full knowledge of because she signed the papers because Robin was a minor at the time that Robin made that move to change everything over. There's a now deleted YouTube account that looks like it was Westman's that shared what appeared to be a manifesto just a few hours before the shooting. It's a very disturbing video. It's about 20 minutes long that appears to show a drawing of a church and then someone stabbing the drawing over and over again as you hear quietly in the background, "I'm going to kill myself." And apparently others as well. Other clips posted to the YouTube account show gun parts and semi-automatic rifle and a shotgun. And the gun parts have the names of other mass shooters written on them. And one of the parts has a message on it aimed at President Trump calling for him to be killed. One of the magazines contained the words, "Kill Donald Trump." One said, "Where is your God?" Mashallah and "Israel must fall" were among the words that were written on various magazines and weapons that this person had. Now, the shooter, Westman here, was trying to inflict as much damage as possible. He barred the door to the church with 2x4s. At least that's what Chief O'Hara says. Let's see. Cut number 404A, please, Mike.
Some neighbors who said that the door to the church had been barricaded.
Yep. So the question was, neighbors had said that the door to the church had been barricaded. The shooter approached on one side of the church building, and on that side, at least 2 doors, it appears there had been like a 2x4 placed. So not all of the doors around the building, but on the side where the shooter did fire.
And on the outside?
On the outside, yes.
So he barred people in and then began shooting through the windows. And it looks like he stayed outside. Cut 404C, please, Mike.
Is this outside or both inside that he was shooting?
The question was he shooting outside and inside? He was absolutely shooting outside of the building on the side of the church, inside through the windows. It appears he may have gone inside, but I don't believe we've located any casings inside the building. So I'm not certain if he fired also while inside. It appears, if not all, most of the shooting happened outside the building.
So, and then after he was finished shooting up the place and shooting through the stained glass windows and had barred people from trying to run away, he killed himself. 404B, please.
Gunshot wound, suspect?
The question was, is he dead from a gunshot wound? The answer is yes. We believe he took his own life in the parking lot.
So, and it's horrific. And they were little children apparently throwing themselves on top of other little children to try to protect them. In fact, we have that cut. I'm not sure where it is, Mike. Okay, so this is one of the little kids that's inside. His name is Weston Halsey. He's 10 years old. He was a student at the school. He says his friend was shot in the back, right on top of him. Cut 409.
Who are you, friend, Wes?
My friend got hit in the back.
Did he go to the hospital?
Yeah, he went to the hospital.
What went through your mind when you saw that?
I was super scared for him, but I think now he's okay.
And he had more to say. Cut 409A.
When you heard the shots, what went through your head?
I was like, the first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something, then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew, and then I covered my head. My friend Victor, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit.
Your friend laid on top of you?
Yeah, and he got hit.
I just, that's a 10-year-old. His life was saved by another 10-year-old who got shot. I can't even begin to imagine what you would do as the parent of one of those childs other than get on your knees and thank God that your child is okay and start praying for the families whose kids are not okay. Isn't that what you do? Especially, think about it. These are little kids praying in a Catholic church. There's a mass to celebrate the beginning of school. And this is what happens. President Trump has signed a proclamation and ordered flags to be flown at half staff on honor of the victims of the shooting. And at the same time, he spoke to Governor Tim Walz, of course, because that's the right thing to do, whether you like Governor Walz or not. That's what you do. And FBI Director Kash Patel says that this is going to be investigated as a hate crime. It's a deliberate act of violence against innocent children and people who were worshiping. So I think that is, in fact, the right thing to do. Governor Walz, of course, came out and spoke at a press conference after the incident. But you may think I'm maybe being unfair, but I didn't find it a particularly helpful speech. And I will admit right up front, I do not like Governor Walz. I find him to be a boob, and disingenuous. And I don't like him. Even I don't like his politics. I don't like him personally. I don't like anything about him. But he's the governor of the state. It was the right thing to do. Get out and you tell people what's going on, because information can usually assuage people's fears, make them feel better. But I don't think what he did was a particularly strong or helpful speech. He rightfully thanked President Trump for his attention to the matter, which was the right thing to do again. But he did not condemn the targeted violence against Catholics. He didn't mention the mental illness that was suffered here by the shooter. It wasn't. He just glossed over things that I think people wanted to know about. And then after he was done, the mayor of Minnesota, Jacob Fry, in a tone-deaf, callous rant, belittled people for sending thoughts and prayers. I want you to hear this for yourself. Cut 405, please.
These were Minneapolis families. These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground.
What the bleep? Is he saying don't pray for the kids who were murdered while praying? Don't pray for Catholics being singled out at the church? Prayer is useless? Is that what he's saying? I could not believe that this was the mayor of a major American city standing in front of a Catholic church that had just been sprayed with bullets where children had just been murdered. And he's saying, don't send your prayers. The Catholic school shooting, church and school shooting in Minneapolis has not elicited the public response that one would expect from its elected officials, or at least that I expected, naive person that I am. First, Governor Walz made no mention when he addressed the public that the shooter was trans, the shooter was anti-Trump, anti-GOP, and he never mentioned that this was anti-Catholic violence. Cut 410, please, Mike.
Certainly a day and a news conference that no one wants to be at. A community behind us, Annunciation Church and School, committed to academics, service, and Catholic values, filled with the first days of school of beautiful children going to learn those values, share with their teachers and their classmates. And instead of that joy and that curiosity and that learning, they were met with evil and horror and death. And we often come to these and say, these unspeakable tragedies, or there's no words for this. There shouldn't be words for these types of incidents because they should not happen. And there's no words that are going to ease the pain of the families today. On behalf of all the people of Minnesota, our deepest sympathies.
Yeah, as far as it goes, I have no problem with that. That's fine. That's fine. Except that he never really addresses the elephant in the room and that what was behind this. Cut 410C.
Minnesotans will not step away. We'll stand with this community. We'll redouble ourselves to do the best we can to understand what we can do to prevent any parent from having to receive the calls they received today, from any school dedicated to children having to respond to a situation that, as we said, is unthinkable, but that's all too common, not just in Minnesota, but across this country. It's Minnesota's day to day, and it's my strongest desire that no state, no community, no school ever experiences a day like this. So I ask the rest of the folks around the country who are watching, keep us in your thoughts and prayers, but also keep us in the thoughts for action. Keep us in the ideas that we can work together. And it's on these days like this, I think, and I hope we can hold on to it. We are unified as a community. Everybody across the country today is part of the Annunciation Parish, and they're with those families.
Okay. I have no problem with what he said. I don't have any problem at all. And he did ask for thoughts and prayers. No problem with any of that. Nothing he said was offensive. Everything was fine. It's just that he left stuff out. He did not mention certain things. For instance, the fact that the shooter was trans. The shooter was crazy. The shooter was anti-MAGA. The shooter was anti-Trump. And here's the thing. Are you telling me that if that shooter had a MAGA hat, if the shooter had written "kill Biden" instead of "kill Trump" on the gun, that we would not have heard about it from Governor Walz? I think we would have. I want you to remember something. This was Governor Walz just last week. Actually, the end of last week, the beginning of this week. Cut 8, please.
We are strong because we challenge each other. We are strong because we're held accountable. We're strong because we believe that there's a place for everyone here. Think of how easy it would be to be a damn Republican. Oh, what should I wear today? This stupid freaking red hat. What should I say today? I don't know. Just make sure it's cruel. Who do we listen to? That guy. Oh, the felon in the White House? Yeah, listen to him and that will be fine.
That was him just a few days ago. Now, I agree that this was not the moment for a tirade, but you hid information. I honest to God believe that if, in fact, it had been a red hat wearing, gun toting, don't like Republican or don't like Democrats, that we would have heard about it. That I don't think that the seriousness of the moment would have stopped Tim Walz from mentioning it. But I will give him this. He did call for thoughts and prayers, and I think that was appropriate. That was an appropriate mention. But then right after he gets down, up comes, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed it, but when he asked for thoughts and prayers, he thought about it for a second, and then he decided to go ahead and do it, and he did the right thing by doing it. But right after him, up comes Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, and he does not want your thoughts and prayers. Let's play that again. Cut 405.
These were Minneapolis families. These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground.
All of the above, but don't send your thoughts and prayers? There was just an attack against a Catholic school, a Catholic church, and you're telling people not to pray? That praying doesn't do anything? What the hell is wrong with these people, meaning the elected officials, in particular the mayor in Minneapolis? That was bizarre. Absolutely, positively bizarre. And you don't think social media has exploded after hearing Mayor Jacob Frey, slamming people for praying? This is from Scott Jennings. He wrote on X, "Tragedy struck a Minneapolis Catholic school today, and the very first thing the Mayor Frey did was attack people of faith for calling for prayer. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. Whatever your political ideology, there are few moments where prayer is not more appropriate." Don't you agree with him? Can you think of any moment in time that prayer is not more appropriate than after something like a school shooting where little children have been murdered and shot? 14 of them shot, injured. I am so with Scott Jennings. And there's so many more. Here's one. Democrat mayor using a tragedy to slander Christians for thoughts and prayers. Wow. While libs of TikTok circulated video of the controversial remarks highlighting his acknowledging that these kids were literally praying. Here's another one. Nothing says idiot politicians like this guy who comes out and promptly attacks and mocks prayer after a tragedy involving people praying, or just any tragedy. What would you say to the mayor of Minneapolis? Are you shocked by this? This is Sandy Shack sitting in for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. The mayor of Minneapolis says don't bother to send thoughts and prayers after the school shooting at the Catholic Church. We need action instead. No thoughts and prayers. What would you like to say to the mayor of Minneapolis? That's a question I have for you, because I'm utterly shocked by this. On the text line, which is 70470-508, let me just make sure I just lose it. It moves, so you tend to lose it for a second. 508 says, the first instinct of that brave child was to protect his friend. Isn't it sad and very telling that the mayor's first instinct is to try to use children's death to make political party more powerful? It's not just sad, it's appalling. It's disgusting. And social media echoes that. Here's another one on social media. I am just gobsmacked that in their effort to immediately politicize a horrific tragedy in which children were murdered at prayer, the line that Democrat after Democrat seems to have chosen is, "Where is your God?" Which, incidentally, the murderer wrote on the magazine, one of the magazines of his gun. Yeah. Is it lost on them? Do they just not see? Are they blind as well as tone deaf? Former Georgia Rep. Vernon Jones tied phrase remarks about "don't bother with your thoughts and prayers" to a broader Democratic messaging. He said, after the Minneapolis murders by a liberal Democrat trans, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, CNN's liberal hack Dana Bash, and other Democrats are now saying it's not about thoughts and prayers anymore. Are Democrats now abandoning prayer? Wow. That's what Vernon Jones heard. Is that what you heard too? I have a cut of that, by the way, of, in fact, Dana Bash with Jacob Fry basically saying exactly that. This is Jacob Fry on... Actually, I was just looking for the CNN cut that we have. There it is. So this is Dana Bash actually with Amy Klobuchar. And they're both kind of gushing over Jacob Fry rejecting prayers over a school shooting. Cut 407, please, Mike.
I just think that they have to get to the bottom of this. As you know, with these scenes from covering so many of them, that there'll be rumors and then they're not true and then you figure it out. But I think this image of this gunman shooting through these windows, picking off these kids while they're praying, is something that it's going to be with people for a long time. When you think about guns and you think about, as the mayor said, thoughts and prayers just aren't enough here now. Because these kids were actually praying.
Yeah, I do want to listen to that because that sent chills up my spine. I'm sure everybody's spine when they heard the mayor say that.
Yeah, so they're right there with the mayor on that. Is this the new Democratic messaging? Is Vernon Jones right? Is there no God, basically? Are they now abandoning prayer? These kids were shot while they're praying, so obviously praying's no good, is what they're saying. Does that send a chill up your spine for a different reason than it does for Dana Bash? Let's go to Bruce in Woburn. Bruce, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
And that's a howl from Bruce from Woburn for these poor kids. And Jacob, that's a biblical name. Can you believe that this guy wouldn't offer any kind of condolences or prayers? And I believe Tim incited some kind of this. It's all involved with this LGBTQ weirdness, and it's just a shame because I'm a shooter. I like guns. I hunt. I fish. I do all kinds of things, but this is just so appalling. And by the way, Sandy, you're doing such a tremendous job.
You're very kind.
I know
Bruce.
Jeff's listening in on you. You are just an awesome human being, and these are not human being actions that are going on right now. This is terrible.
What do you say about the mayor's comment regarding don't bother to send your thoughts and prayers because we don't need them? Bruce?
And I'm too much of a religious person to even say he can go to hell in a handbasket. This is so, I can't even, I don't have the words. It's appalling. I went up to Ossipee to my friend's wife. One of my best friend's wife got killed by a guy driving on fentanyl and hit her head on in a dump truck and killed her.
Oh, gosh.
She was the nicest, kindest, gentlest person, the biggest smile. She lit up the room. I cried during my interview with the... But anyways, when I heard what happened for those little kids that had to... The ones that got killed, I cried for. And I'm a pretty tough guy.
Yeah.
But it just my heartstrings. I can't believe that there are people that want to do this kind of things to anybody, let alone little kids that are praying.
I know it.
Now, what if that was a Muslim praying on a rug and there'd be all kinds of
I think they'd be calling it, I think Mayor Waltz would have come out with it's a hate crime. I think we probably would have heard that from him. So thank you for the call, Bruce. And I'm sure that the families of those people in Minneapolis are grateful for your prayers. No matter what the mayor of Minneapolis has to say, I think that that's something to remember, that the people of Minneapolis and the people of that parish and that church and those families affected are not necessarily represented by Mayor Jacob Fry. Let's go to Miranda in Providence. Miranda, welcome to WRKO. What would you like to say to Mayor Fry, Miranda?
Before Mayor Fry, I just have to say, I have a question. Given the low bar for Tim Walz, his comment and his statement was fine. I just wondered what he meant by "we stand by this community."
Yeah, I wonder that too.
I wondered which community he meant, the greater community or the trans.
That's a really, you know what, Miranda? That is such a good point. That is an absolute brilliant point, because that flitted through my mind briefly, but I didn't focus on it. I think I don't know either. I'm hoping he meant the Catholic community, because since he didn't actually reference the trans community at all when he spoke to the public, that didn't acknowledge the trans community, even, he doesn't want to acknowledge that has anything to do with the shooting, I think, is what's going on. But you raise a very good point. I'm sorry. Continue, Miranda.
Hoping he meant the city, the state, whatever. But here's what I want to say about Jacob Fry. Does anyone remember? I'm amazed. I was so surprised that he's still in office, still in politics. Does anyone remember when he came out? Maybe it was during the George Floyd thing. Mm-hmm. He came out to the center of town, and the entire town turned their back on him and walked away. Look that up. He came out to make a statement, and the statement was so out of touch that the entire town people turned around and walked away, and he was left standing there by himself.
Yeah, I think I do think you're right. I also, now that you bring it up, I also wanted to point out that he's being a little hypocritical when he's telling people not to pray for the victims of the shooting, because if you remember, when he was during his high-profile mourning at George Floyd's casket, he's saying, why are people criticizing prayer? For millions, prayer is the most significant, profound thing that can do in the wake of evil. And so, he was all for prayer at George Floyd's funeral. But in this particular instance, when the shooter is somebody, or it's not politically expedient for him to acknowledge prayer or the shooter, then all of a sudden it's a bad thing to do. I'm so glad you pointed that out, Miranda. Yeah, he was a wailer in the services for George Floyd and thought prayer was fine then. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry says, we don't need your thoughts and prayers after the Catholic Church school shooting. We need action. I'm going to play the cut again because it's just, it floors me every time. Cut 405.
These were Minneapolis families. These were American families. And the amount of pain that they are suffering right now is extraordinary. And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground.
Is he saying that because these kids were shot while they were in church, that prayer is useless? We shouldn't bother praying? Or are Democrats basically, is this a sign that Democrats are abandoning religion? Is that what you're seeing here? 617-266-6868 is the number. Paul in New Hampshire, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Paul? Paul?
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Fine. So what do you think? Why would the mayor say that? Is he saying prayer is useless, or is this a Democrat Party line?
I'm not interested in micromanaging the mayor's neural network. What I'm interested in talking about is how does this come about? The whole pharmaceutical push for expensive drugs for a lifetime, if they last that long, is just a horror show. It's an assault on the soul and on the human biology. We're all getting estrogen-mimicking compounds in our clothes, in our water, in our food. It's ridiculous how this is going on. The government's doing nothing about that.
I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to make an effort to clean up stuff. So you're saying that this was caused by Big Pharma. That's one way to look at it, Paul. I appreciate the call. But I think there's a bigger issue here than mental illness, to be honest with you. I think there's multiple issues that come out of this shooting, and the mental illness is certainly one of them, of the shooter. But to me, another huge issue, and we don't know enough about the shooter yet to really, we know enough. And we know enough but we don't know what we'll know in a week from now, I'm saying. So I think we need to, the motivation, obviously, besides mental illness and things that could have been done to stop this person, are issues that we will absolutely talk about. But to me, right now, the issue for me within 24 hours of this happening is the response of the elected officials in Minneapolis, and for a mayor of a major city to come out after obviously a school, a religious school church shooting, to say don't bother to pray, just floored me. And I was having this conversation with Mike, who said, and by the way, I just want to point out, it was not a misspeak. It was not just something he threw off casually. He meant it. And the reason why I say that is he went on various cable shows afterward, and he's kind of repeating the same mantra. Here he is with Jen Psaki on MSNBC, cut 406.
The individual possibly being trans, about the individual possibly having negative things to say about Trump, about some things that have been on the weapons. A lot of this is just very early reporting. What do you do as a leader of your city to prevent details from being weaponized and using this to blame something other than the guns?
First off, anybody who is using this as an opportunity to villainize trans people has completely lost touch with a common humanity. Operate not off of hate for any community. Operate off of love for our kids. Kids died today. This should be about protecting our children. This should be about loving our children. And far too often, I feel like people will think of the conclusion that they want to get to, and then they'll reverse manufacture the facts that they want to hear to get to that end point.
Isn't that what he's doing? We don't want to go into the mental illness behind the shooter, which they're a member of the trans community. Don't blame the trans community for this. But if it had been a Republican, or a good old boy with a red MAGA hat, who shot up, we would be going after his community with no problem. So I think it's very disingenuous. And for him to say this is about the children and then tell people don't bother to pray is frightening. And as I've started to say before, Mike and I had this conversation before the show started, and he's like, why would the mayor say that? Why would he not ask for prayers? And what occurred to me is that that's the progressive response to religion. It goes back to, remember, after the Russian Revolution, the Soviet communists, basically, the first thing they attacked after the revolution were the churches, because the churches were an authority that was outside the party. And so what they want is no God, only government. And because they want to be the only authority. They don't want anything else that will take away from their authority. And so the first thing they did was get rid of the churches and say God is dead. Is that what the Democrats are doing here? Did the mask slip with Jacob Fry in Minneapolis after the shooting? Is that what the progressives are going to? God is dead? I mean, that's basically what the shooter was saying when he shot. And how ironic that the mayor of Minneapolis is echoing that when telling people not to pray. Do you think I'm reading too much into this? Or do you think that, yeah, that is where this is going? It's belittling religion. It's telling you it doesn't work. Kids were shot while praying. So, wow. That to me is a really frightening turn of events. Mark in Medford, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Mark?
Hey, Sandy, how's it going?
So do you think I'm reading too much into this, Mark, or do you think this is a turn away from God the way the old Soviet communists did?
Sandy, for the past 8-10 years now, they've been denouncing God. So I know, I agree with you. You're not far from the truth here. Believe me when I tell you. But what I have, you played quite a few clips from, these liberal Democrats this morning, and not once have I heard the calls and the cries for the gun control. We have to get guns off the street because guns kill people.
Oh, we're getting there, Mark. We're heading in that direction. What do you think? What do you think that Mayor Jacob Fry was referring to when he said we need action, not prayers? That's exactly what he was talking about. He doesn't want to hear your prayers. So I think you have a double-edged sword there coming in, or a two-pronged attack. One, don't bother to pray because, God is dead. And then we need action. The action he's talking about is gun control. So that's exactly what they were doing, Mark.
I did think that for a second there was the hidden message in there without saying it. Yes, I did think that. But on the other hand, Sandy, you have to think this, okay? Is it because they're not really pushing the gun control issue here? Is it because, oh, wait a minute, this guy didn't like Catholics. The shooter did not like Catholics. He hated MAGA, and he hated Trump. So there's no really calls for gun control. But I can guarantee you this, like you said earlier, if this was a shooter that hated liberals, hated trans, or hated Democrats and didn't agree with everything they said, then one of the first things out of their mouths would be, we have to get guns off the streets.
Well, I think basically that is the first thing out of a lot of... In fact, Chuck Schumer, before we even knew what happened at the school shooting, literally within minutes, Mark, within minutes. I mean, the shooting occurred about 8:30 in the morning. Within minutes of that, I would say before 9 o'clock even, we didn't even know what was happening, before any details were released on what weapons were used or how the weapons were acquired, Senator Schumer put a post up on X to push for gun control. And then he also pushed, don't forget, he also pushed for gun control before the facts were known following the Midland shooting that was in 2019. And he pushed for universal background checks before anything was known regarding how the attacker acquired his firearm then. But he did it here, too. So, no, they've started it. And to me, that's appalling, too. But to me, the worst thing, besides pushing for the guns, which we are going to talk about, is the fact that we're belittling God and belittling the power of prayer. That's part of the argument. Don't bother to pray. Go after the guns. That's what he said. That's what he was saying with Jen Psaki. And that's what Dana Bash was saying with Amy Klobuchar, too. This exact same thing. She's saying that basically we need the guns, don't bother with prayer. So they are saying it, but they've married it with this argument, Mark, of don't pray. Because, as I said before, the progressive movement, the communist movement, doesn't want you to pray. They need to get rid of the church because the church can supplant them in the hierarchy of society, and nothing can supplant them if they want to bring all of their hopes and wishes to fruition. Does that make sense to you, Mark?
A lot of sense to me, Sandy. I got a question. How old was the shooter?
The shooter was 19, 20, I think. thereabouts.
19 years old. Here's another thing for you, Sandy. I guess he had mentioned in his manifesto that he was dealing with some issues.
Yeah.
Mental issues, and admitted it in the manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
Where was his mom and dad? How do you have a child and you not notice this with your child?
Well, that's interesting because they were certainly aware of a lot of what was going on with their child because the mom. Well, I can't speak for the dad. I haven't seen any mention of the dad at all, but the mom was aware of what the kid was going through in regard to identifying as the opposite sex, because the mom is the one that, so the shooter, when they died, name was Robin Westman, a transgender woman who is formerly known as Robert. And Robert petitioned to have his name changed to Robin in 2019. And mom had to sign the application because Robin was a minor at the time. So, and mom, by the way, was an employee at the school where the shooting occurred right up until, I think, 3 or 4 years ago when she retired. So mom had to be aware of a lot, but I don't know if mom ever looked at the social media pages. I don't know. That account's been taken down, so I can't go through and see what happened in the past. And the manifesto with the really violent, horrible stuff was only up there, I think, just a few hours before the shooting occurred. There had to have been other things too, but I don't know because I didn't see it. But the video, the 20-minute video, Mark, is really, it's gut-wrenching. It's horrific. And I mean, they talk about, Robert talks about how, he's going to kill himself, but he doesn't really talk about hurting other people. And then when you look at the pictures and see the captions on the pictures, you begin to be concerned for other people. But I have no answer for that, Mark. I don't know where dad is, but I can tell you mom had to be aware of something. I don't know why she wasn't aware of more, to be honest with you.
Leave you with this last question, Sandy. If mom was more concerned and more involved with when her son decided he wanted to be a girl and got more involved with it and paid more attention to it, could maybe have this not happened?
I don't know the answer to that. That's one of those, hypothetical questions that we will never know the answer to. I tend to think that parental involvement is key to helping anybody through a mental illness, and family support is key to helping people get through a family illness. But I don't believe that we'll ever know in this case. But thank you for the call, Mark. I appreciate it very much. The number is 617-266-6868. We're talking about the response of the mayor of Minneapolis after that horrible school shooting at Annunciation school, Catholic school yesterday, where 2 children were murdered, 14 were shot, and a couple of adults were killed. And then the shooter, a very troubled trans woman, killed herself. I go back and forth. A texter saying, is it her or him? I go back and forth depending on what news story I've just read. Some of the papers are referring to the shooter as him. Some are referring to it as her. I think I don't think either way is wrong, to be honest with you. I think depending on what your stand, if you want to refer to Robin, if you're referring to Robin, then it's her, and if you're referring to a past life as Robert, then it's a him. I don't think, and the police chief refers to the shooter as him. So I think that's probably where I will land, because that's where the law officials are referring to him. He's the shooter and him and so forth. So he may have changed his name to Robin, but it doesn't look like he did anything else other than that. I don't know for sure. We'll find out over the next week. I don't think just by changing your name, you change your gender. So I think you got to do a lot more than that. And a lot of people don't believe you can ever change it. So it's really a personal reading of the situation. But what we're talking about is the mayor's response to this horrible shooting, and that is to tell people not to bother to pray. these kids were shot while praying, so don't bother to pray. We need action. And the action he's referring to is gun control. So you have the Democratic mayor of Minneapolis coming out with dead children, turning it into a political diatribe against prayer and for gun control. And why would you do that? Why? And social media exploded. My head exploded. And I'm thinking, why would you do that? And when Mike asked the question, the only thing I can think of is that is the progressive way. They want to get rid of the church. God is dead. Is that? And did the mask of the mayor slip when he said that? When he said, don't bother to pray, was he supposed to say it? Or is that really what he thinks? And he just said it without thinking because it was a press conference in a heated moment after a huge tragedy. I think that's what happened. I don't think he was meant to say it. But once he did, it was out there. And okay, the other progressive jumped on board. Yeah, don't bother to pray. Is that what's going on here? Is it a further move to the left? Let's go to Angelo in Rockland. Angelo, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I don't think that was a slip of the tongue. Most of the things those Democratic people are regime or whatever you want to call them, because they're not human lately. They don't want to pray. They don't want to have any compassion, but they want you to bow down to the Antichrist. Not happening. This is America. We are all one. You can do what you want, but be legal when you do it. Maybe they should just have no trial and a death penalty to send a strong message, because he's caught red-handed, and it's not a girl. They want to be called girls, but they want to have respect. You can't have respect when you're like that. So he's got to go right to the chair in my eyes, and I don't know that'll ever happen, but you got to send a strong message. And, most of the American people, MAGA, whatever, we don't care what anybody does, transgender, do whatever you want. Don't force it in our face. Leave the little kids alone till they're 18 and legal, and then they can decide what they want to do. And everybody else just live life and respect, and we'll have no problems. I mean, what do you think about that? And
I think that's the common sense approach, Angelo. I think that's exactly where most Americans are. I think you've put your finger on it. I don't care what you do. As long as you're not hurting anybody, I don't care what you do. And you can go ahead and find peace in your own world, whatever that takes. I wish you to go with God, and I wish you to be happy. That's what I want for you. It's what I want for everybody. But I agree with you. But when somebody goes awry, either because they didn't get the psychological help they needed, mom, as Mark and Medford pointed out, mom wasn't paying attention when the signs were there, and you became imbalanced to the point of killing people. And not just people, little children who are praying. I mean, do you have a more innocent, vulnerable victim than that? And, because you are insane. And I don't know anybody who can say that anybody who would do that is not insane. And I think the situation ended the way it should have. To be honest with you, I'm not crying any tears over the gunman killing himself in the parking lot. It saves us the cost of a trial and cost of an execution at some later date. So, but I think your position is where most people are. Most people don't care. And the left wants you to believe, Angelo, that we do care. The left wants people to believe that we're furious. We want anybody who isn't like us to be wiped off the face of the earth, which is the farthest thing from the truth. I don't care if you're like me. I don't care what traits you share with me. I want you to be happy. As long as you don't hurt anybody else, God go with you. I think that's how most of us feel. But the left are portraying us as monsters who don't like diversity. And so they think it's justifiable to hide the truth of what happened at this shooting, who the shooter was, what their motivation could be. We can't mention that because it'll fly in the face of that, conservatives and Americans hate people who aren't like them or hate people who are different than them. They want to hide, they have to keep that mantra alive. And so that's why I think they hid what was actually happening. Don't you, Angelo?
So I believe you. Yeah, you're definitely, well, all of us are on the same page, and they just keep spewing the hate. And there's no hate. It's just an understanding and respect all around.
Yeah.
And I think it'll get better as time goes on. Hopefully the people start to realize that and realize that it's just a ploy to keep the hate going, you know?
Well, don't you think, though, that they've reached a new bar by telling people not to pray? It's one thing, you know, to hide the actual facts behind a situation or not address them or accuse people if they point out, well, wait a minute, didn't the shooter? No, you can't go there because that's hate. If you point out that the shooter was trans and had some mental issues, you're a hater. But if you point out that the shooter was, you know, a MAGA hat wearing Republican, that's justifiable because that fits the progressive story. But I think they reached a new low, actually, when they tell you not to pray. That, to me, was an attack on religion and the church, not just the Catholic Church, but churches and religion in general. And I think that's one of the first things that communist progressives do when they're moving to remake society is get rid of churches. And I think that's what we saw in Minneapolis. Do you think I'm right?
I think absolutely that's part of what's been going on for many years here. When it started, no more Merry Christmas, it's Happy Holidays. They start just chipping away and keep getting away what they can get away with. But you know, we don't say don't, you know, Ramadan, whatever it is. You can do what you want. This is America, but you have to go along with the American way. And if you're not happy with that, well, don't be here. I mean, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but this is America. We're founded on many, many cultures, thank God. And many cultures are still trying to get here legally.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm only third generation, and I love it here. And somewhat of a military family as well. And, you know, it's what it has to be. Thank God we have the right to have our differences and so forth, you know. But that's all I really have to say on that. But hopefully things are getting better.
Well, thank you for the call, Angelo. I appreciate it very much. And hopefully things are getting better, too. And I agree with you. We're founded on diversity. The mayor of Minneapolis says, don't bother to pray for the victims of the church school shooting. After all, they were praying when they were shot. What we need is action. Is he repeating the old communist manifesto mantra, God is dead? Which is very ironic when you realize that the shooter had God is dead written on one of the magazines for the gun. You know, I mean, wow. 617-266-6868. The text number is 70470. 978 says, so God is dead. So now who's to blame? Atheists use the idea God is dead for more power and control over your life because, in my opinion, they want us to plant God. Prayer is primarily a conversation between you and God for a deeper relationship and understanding. God is not an ATM. I agree with that. And so I think what you have here is you have the elected mayor denigrating prayer and calling for gun control in the same breath while standing in the parking lot of the church where kids were killed within hours of him standing there. You know, do the Democrats have no shame? Is that what is happening here? Are they literally turning the deaths of children into a political opportunity? You know, they have already alienated a huge section of America by ignoring crime and by trying actually to defend crime against President Trump's crime sweeps in cities like, you know, District of Columbia. And now they suddenly recognize crime in Minneapolis, and they're going to use the deaths of these kids over their pet issue of gun control. Is that what's happening here? I mean, Schumer came out within minutes of the shooting, didn't even know what had happened, and he was screaming for gun control. Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, went right out. She was on MSNBC yesterday morning talking about a national ban on assault weapons, talking about the school shooting. So, I mean, they let, and here you have the mayor of Minneapolis, the guy who's supposed to represent these families, saying, don't bother to pray, we need action, within minutes of this happening. You know, God is dead and we need gun control. That's what I heard. Is that what you heard as well? Jan in New Hampshire, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Jan? Jan?
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
So I'm going to say something a little different.
Okay.
So I am a Republican. I am a Catholic. Cartarian Catholic, sure. And my rosary in hand.
Jan, can I stop you? Are you on a speakerphone?
I have hearing aids, so I have to speak into my phone, yes.
Okay, because you have an echo, so it's kind of hard to hear you. So could you speak right up to the speaker and see if that makes a difference?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. It's a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm asking for is prayers for the children, grace and mercy to all those people that need it. And also prayers that these people find God. We really need to pray for that because somewhere along the way they have lost touch with reality, and that's what He is, and He's love. The other thing is prayer for a solution to mental health. And I don't think guns are the issue. I'm a gun holder. And that's about it. Just grace and mercy.
Well, I appreciate it. Those are lovely thoughts, and I appreciate them, Jan, very much. But I don't think they've lost God, Jan. I think they jettisoned Him. Do you think? Maybe you think I'm being too harsh, but I think that they deliberately walked away from God for political expediency. I think that texter before has their finger on it. This is about having political control. And when you want political control, you don't want to fight someone else for that. And that can be another political party, but it can also be God. You don't want to fight God for authority over other people. You want them to look to you. And I think that is what's motivating this and what motivated that appalling comment, don't bother to pray. But I think you are incredibly kind, and I join you in your prayers for grace and mercy for those poor families in Minneapolis. Thank you very much for the call, Jan. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to Jim in Waltham. Jim, welcome to WRKO. Do you think I'm being too harsh?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like religion? Communists. And I think we have to start saying it. I've heard you say it a few times, and I appreciate that. I hear progressive, liberals, a lot of these Democrats in control are communists. And we have to face it. And we have to start saying it because they won't. They're not calling themselves communists.
No.
I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure that this mayor of Minneapolis is probably a communist. And yeah, he wants to progress. He wants to push the communist agenda forward. That's more important than a couple dead kids. They act like they care about dead kids. They don't. They care about moving their communist agenda forward. The reason they want to take away guns is because us gun owners, good people in America, will stand up and stop their revolution. They want diversity.
Did you know that one of the things in regard to gun control, in the manifesto, the shooter's manifesto, one of the things in there was that he had chosen the church as the perfect place for the shootout. He was going to hurt children. He was trying to decide whether to do it on the playground, whether to do it someplace else. But he picked the church because it was a no-gun zone. That was actually written in his manifesto. So the fact that he knew there would be no guns there is why he chose that particular venue as opposed to the playground, because he knew there was nobody there who could shoot back. And to the whole issue of gun control, sometimes gun-free zones can be a magnet for tragedy, as opposed to an area where somebody might be afraid that somebody would be armed and be able to take them out. They're looking for sitting ducks, and so they go to the gun-free zone. Just in case you didn't know that, Jim, I just thought I'd let you know. I agree with you about this being a communist issue. But I also want to point out that arose by any other name, progressives are the new communists. 617-266-6868. This is Sandy Shack. This is the Kuhner Report. The mayor of Minneapolis wants no prayers for the victims of the school shooting. He wants gun control. We know this because that's what he said before the broken glass was even swept up from the stained glass windows at the Annunciation Church after the shooting. Is this what progressives stand for now? God is dead and we're coming for your guns? Is that the platform that they're putting out there? You know, I heard more about gun control yesterday on cable news than I did about mental illness and the mayor's appalling comment about prayer. At ABC, their White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, called out, are you ready? President Trump for not throwing the weight and heft of his office into addressing mass shootings. Cut 403, please, Mike.
From those Democratic members of Congress, calls again for more gun reforms. Of course, we have said this far too often. There simply is not the political will in this town, and there hasn't been for some time now, to take meaningful action on gun reforms. President Trump casts himself as a tough-on-crime president right now in Washington, D.C. Members of the National Guard are here on the street. The administration has taken significant steps to take control of the Metropolitan Police Department here, but he has not so far thrown really the weight and the heft of his administration behind doing something to meaningfully address this epidemic in this country. And I think, as we've been saying, it is the horrific reality in this country that every single parent has to worry about school shootings, especially this time of year when every parent holds their child's hand and walks them to school for the first day. They wonder, will they be safe? Is my child coming home?
Yeah, and then she went on, by the way, it was just enough, I can't take it anymore, but she went on to echo those comments from Jacob Frey, Mayor Jacob Frey, rejecting the calls for thoughts and prayers. So it's not just, Mayor Frey. It's others too, calling for gun control and blaming Trump for the shooting. Never mind the fact that the shooter had killed Trump written on one of his magazines. Basically, they're blaming him for that. Over at CNN, they got on the same bandwagon, but also they outright lied about the weapons used in the attack. This is CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez inaccurately claiming that the semi-automatic firearms could fire dozens of bullets with a single pull of the trigger while doing a report on the Minneapolis shooting. That's cut 40. Is it? No, cut 401. I'm sorry, 401.
It was really disturbing to hear what the man we heard from the affiliate said about how long it went on. He said there were several minutes. Now, we don't know if that was just from the shooter or if law enforcement had arrived by then or the circumstances around that. But he said it sounded like the gun was reloaded several times. It seemed like a rifle, he said, a semi-automatic rifle, and it went on for several minutes.
Right, and look, that's not uncommon as well. These things can shoot dozens of bullets, in just one trigger pull, right? And so what happens in this case is sometimes they have enough time to reload. It's one of the most horrific things for students to be sitting there. You saw this in Uvalde, you see this in Newtown repeatedly, where a shooter has enough time to reload, and the horrific nature of this is, for little kids to be facing this.
It's just too much to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is complete and utter balderdash what happened there. That's not what happened. It's not what was incorrectly termed as an assault weapon is a semi-automatic firearm that fires just one bullet with each pull of the trigger. And it's different from a fully automatic firearm, which is a machine gun, which continues to shoot until the trigger is released. And if you go and look and on the NRA's website, or numerous websites, there's a lot of websites that will tell you the difference between a semi-automatic and an automatic weapon. Under current federal law, it is illegal to possess a fully automatic firearm that is not registered under the provisions of the National Firearms Act. You can go to the NRA to find out all about this stuff. It was not an automatic weapon that was used. I'm not saying there was anything good about what this guy did, but he just gave a completely inaccurate picture of the weapons in his zeal to make a case for banning the guns that were used at the shooting. Now, you may find other reasons to ban those guns, and we can have a discussion on banning guns, but that was a lie that he just gave on the air. I'm just saying, isn't the truth bad enough on its own that you can make your arguments from the existing true facts? Do you have to make stuff up? And I guess the answer is, yeah, they need to wait. They need to make, things up. So that's what the Democrats are doing. That's what their water-carrying cable news outlets are doing. Do you think that this is helping them gain supporters by lying about things, by denigrating prayer, by standing in the shadow of a church within hours of a school shooting and calling for an abolition of the Second Amendment? Do you think this is winning them friends and influencing people? I think they're misjudging most Americans. What do you think, Rich and Natick? Rich?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. What do you think?
Hey, well, I think the social media has helped expose.
Rich, can you pick up your phone, please? There's a bad echo because it's on speaker.
Okay, is that better?
No. No,
Hold
it's
on.
not. Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's better. That's much better. Thank you, Rich.
I'm sorry, I was in the middle of doing something.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
at work.
Yeah.
I have to pay for.
Well,
I have
thank
to pay
you.
for people on welfare.
Exactly
yeah.
right.
But one of your previous callers mentioned the ultimate goal here is take away guns from society, and it's through this plan by manipulating children. Right, by the way, who are the easiest people to manipulate in society because they're children and they don't know better. And I put down a list, and these are just some things that I believe that contribute to the culture rot. Mm-hmm. The acronym diagnosis, giving kids drugs while they're growing up, they alter their brain chemistry, the toxic masculinity that started 20 years ago. The lack of discipline in the home, the bullying, the anti-social media, I call it. Teachers telling kids not to tell their parents about transitioning, removing religion and family structure, and it could probably go on and on. But all these things contribute. But this is an evil agenda under the Democrat Party and probably others to undermine and try and remove guns. Look at this guy talking about need more gun control. This stuff didn't happen when I was growing up. I'm almost 60 years old. Mm-hmm. This stuff wasn't happening when I was growing up. You know what? So what has changed? That's the bigger question. What has changed over the years? And some of those things I just listed have changed.
I think I agree with what you were saying, but I think it's more than just take away guns. I think it's take away guns and take away God. That's what I heard yesterday. I heard both of those things under attack. Do you think I'm misreading the situation?
No, I mentioned that. Yes, remove religion and family structure. So it's about control. It's about control in the end.
Yeah, all of the above.
If you're in power and you want to keep that power, who's a threat to you? Men and guns.
I think who's a threat to you is anybody who can be a competing authority. So I think you're right. You want to take away people's freedoms, and that includes the Second Amendment, includes the First Amendment too. So that's why whenever you would say something that people didn't like, you have the whole cancel culture movement. You got to stop people from saying things you don't like. You got to take away the guns. You got to take away God. You got to take away, as you said, the family structure, because that gives people support and power as well. So we got to take all those things away so that you have the nanny state. You rely upon the state for everything, and that's where the ultimate party is. And I think that's what we saw exposed yesterday, is the movement toward that, the progressive movement toward that. And I found it frightening, first of all, that somebody would use a Catholic school shooting, and two, not mention that it's a hate crime against Catholics, against religion. Instead of mentioning that that's a hate crime, actually make that hate crime worse by doing your own little attack against religion, while basically pretending that that you're on the side of the angels, no pun intended. I think that's what I saw, which I found really reprehensible. How about you, Rich?
Ultimately, it's a fight against good, against evil.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
I think it's becoming that. I don't think it was always that, but I think it's fast becoming that. Thank you so much, Rich. I appreciate the call. Let's go to David in Haverhill. David, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sandy. First time caller, and I really enjoy listening to you.
Oh, thank you.
My take is that, yes, the politicians are going to flip it however it benefits them. But in reality, these kids that are taking these hormones to change themselves before their brains are fully developed, that is a problem. I don't believe that we should allow them to make that decision. I think kids naturally go through hormonal changes when they're in their teens, and then compound that with allowing them to make that own decision before their brain is fully developed at 21 to get more hormone shots, which send them into a rage. I just don't think that should have been.
I'm sorry, David, we have to hold you there because we're up against a hard break. The mayor of Minneapolis wants you to believe we need more gun control and prayers are not needed. Are you aghast? Do you think most Americans are aghast at that? Is the Democratic Party clubbing itself over the head with comments like this? Do you think they're winning friends by coming out against prayer? Prayer is useless. After all, the mayor says these kids were shot while praying. We don't need your prayers. We need action. Were you offended by that comment? Because Lord knows, no pun intended there either. I was. Let's speak to Bob in Fall River. Bob, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
Hello. It's actually very good to talk with you. I was mentioned to Mike that I'm really disheartened by this, and I'll tell you why. For one, what does that mayor believe that someone like, say, myself in Fall River, who's a long-standing Catholic, is going to do? I'm not going to be able to fly over to Minneapolis and clear off stained glass pieces off the ground. I'm not going to be able to go and change legislation over there. Only people like him can. And I'm choosing my words very carefully, so I'll just say he's an SOB for saying something like that. Mm-hmm. But if Trump came out today and said, well, I want to send a small contingent of the National Guard to Minneapolis just to kind of clear things over for the next week or two, what do you think he would say? He would say, hell no, because the reason is he wants it done his way. And what his way obviously isn't working, right? And what I find so disheartening is that his words were parroted like on message boards all over the internet yesterday. Oh, what the hell good are thoughts and prayers? And if you say anything like, hey, it's kind of my way of saying, I hope that those children find some solace, or the parents find some solace. It's trying to say, hey, we're here with you. And for him to kind of just denigrate, like essentially it's a real slap in the face to the Catholics. But it's just, you're right, it is religion in general. But I think that it's disheartening because, up until yesterday, I really always was like, you know what, things will work out. But when I started to look at how half of the people who I read on these message boards online were essentially in agreement with him, and I was like, I think that we're at a point. I mean, how a lot of times we say the Democrats and the Republicans, there's not much of a middle ground anymore, and it's shrinking rapidly, right? I don't think that a lot of them are ever going to change their mind, and they're going to find reasons to say, oh, yeah, well, it's the guns. No, it is. That person yesterday was just a sicko, and the fact that he comes out against, prayer and stuff, well, the person who wasn't praying is the person who shot people up, not not the people who are actually in the church. The person who had no cares for religion in general. Maybe he should say something along those lines, but you know that won't occur.
No, because it doesn't fit the party line, Bob. That's why it doesn't. They don't want religion to be important to people. They don't want people to use religion as a means of support and solace and power. They want to be the only source of power, so they have to denigrate something that's in competition with that, and that would be God. They don't want people turning to God or seeing any authority that's higher than they are. I think that's part of what we saw yesterday, and like you, I found it frightening. I was like, oh my God, is it an elected official at the scene of a horrible shooting just told America, don't pray. We don't need your prayers. We need gun control. Literally turned the deaths of children that died within an hour of him standing there. Basically said, used their deaths, used their spilled blood for this. I was completely horrified, and I was racking my brain saying, how could a human being do that? And the only answer I have is that, is harkening back in my education to what it was like in Soviet Russia after the Russian Revolution. And that's what they did. They got rid of churches because churches were a competing authority. And so God is dead. And that's what I heard yesterday. So you put it very, very well. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the call, Bob. I don't think that the Democrats really won any friends yesterday with what they were saying. And I don't think they can stop hurting themselves. They misrepresenting a shooting situation to scare, to score points. As a political issue, hiding who the shooter was, not calling it a hate crime, denigrating prayer at a church, a Catholic school church shooting, where people were murdered while praying. And let's not forget how the Democrats have put themselves in a position where they've been defending criminals and ranting against law enforcement after President Trump has sent, National Guard to aid and assist the law enforcement in Washington, D.C. It sounds to me like they've utterly panicked over President Trump's success in fighting crime and are using a school shooting to try to put themselves on the side of law and order after being against it for weeks. Is that a particularly jaded view of what I'm looking at here, or do you think I'm right? Seriously. They've been going on and on about, oh no, we can't fight the crime in D.C. with National Guard. That's bad. That's bad. This is an attack against democracy. He's a dictator. This is fascist. It's racist. You can't do any of that. And so they've been actually arguing on the side of the criminals for weeks. The school shooting happens, and all of a sudden we're law and order. We need gun control. And just for good measure, let's throw in the no prayer thing. Was this panic? Was this trying to save themselves after weeks of looking like bloody idiots? Is that what's going on here? They have been looking like nuts, don't you think? It's been, in fact, what was it, J.D. Vance, I think, when he was at Union Station the end of last week, he was basically saying the Democrats have been acting freaking crazy, and that's their big problem. I think I have that cut. I'm just looking. Yeah, here it is. Cut 201A, please, Mike.
The Democrats really can't help themselves. If you look at the transgender issue, they're still talking about letting men play in women's sports. If you look at the crime issue, they're calling Donald Trump a fascist for taking action that in 9 days has dropped armed robberies by 55%. So part of sounding less crazy is being less crazy. And if the Democrats were less crazy, I think we'd all get along a whole lot better.
Yeah, they've been acting crazy. And so, because they've been supporting crime, literally supporting crime in D.C. Have you seen any of that, what they've been doing? So all of a sudden the school shooting happens, and it's like they think, oh, you know what? We can be on the side of law and order, and we're going to call for gun control because that's all about law and order. But it backfired on them because, first of all, they did it standing in pools of blood from children who had just been shot. And they, at the same time, they couldn't help themselves. They simultaneously did it in the form of the Minneapolis mayor called for, denigrated prayer at the same time they were calling for, quote, law and order. I think this was an attempt to resurrect themselves from the wastebasket of political relevance. And instead, I think it's backfired on them. I think it's backfired on them spectacularly. Bob in Raynham, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Bob?
Hey, Sandy. Yes, I'd like to say that, not that I agree with the mayor. I mean, the guy was an idiot to say what he said when he said it. And I know what his motivation was regarding, let's not pray, let's take the guns away. But my motivation would have been continue to pray, but yeah, we have to do something about this. And it's not taking the guns away. It's helping people with mental illness, and it's institutionalized people, and then also to bring back the death penalty for such a horrific crime. I know this guy killed himself, and I'd like to tie it back to the marathon bombing, if I could, and even 9/11.
Okay.
The marathon bombing, same thing. That horrific thing happened. We still have one of these guys still breathing the air. Several people were killed and are maimed forever in their life. And then people run out and buy Boston Strong T-shirts, and it's kind of gross. And then they go back to 9/11 again after that horrific action. Those guys are still in jail. They haven't been executed yet, which I just recently found that out and find that amazing. Mm-hmm. And again, I went, not maybe like 5 years after, 9/11, I went down to see the monument and stuff. And there's a gift shop down there. And at that time, they were selling stuffed Dalmatians. And, I mean, it's just gross. I mean, it's like, and actually at that time, my son was about 12 years old. We're standing in the line. It was still kind of under construction, the monument and maybe the new building. And there's a bunch of Arabs in the line. And my son, who was 12 at the time, said, "Daddy, are these guys here to honor these people, or are they here? Are they happy to be here?" And I'm like, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. But, I mean, again, my motivation would be the complete opposite of that mayor's. We gotta take back control of our country, and we have to end these evil people. We have to get them off the planet.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. That should have been what he said, but it isn't. And I don't think he said it for a couple of reasons. One, the shooter did not fit the political narrative that he wanted. He would have said that if the shooter, I think, had been wearing a MAGA hat and, been a good old boy or somebody who was a Trump supporter. I think you would have heard something very close to that, Bob. But instead, the shooter didn't fit that narrative, and the shooter fit what the progressives have turned into a protected class of people. And so in order to protect themselves, they have to protect the identity of the shooter and not pigeonhole him in any particular group of people. And I think that's why he didn't go there. But he went even further than that. Instead, he said he's calling for gun control. And even more bizarrely, he's saying we don't need your prayers. He's denigrating religion. So I think I agree with you completely as to what should have been a thinking, empathetic mayor's response, but that's not what we had yesterday from the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey. We had a political animal who's a progressive and who has a mantra he has to follow come hell or high water, and that's what he did. And I think in doing so, he alienated people. Instead of bringing people on board, which is what I think he hoped he would do, I think he just alienated people, because he certainly alienated me, and it sounds like he alienated you too, Bob. Did he?
Oh yeah, they just can't help themselves, and actually to do that quickly after this incident is just reprehensible. I mean, they are really, they're evil. They're evil people. I don't know how else to describe them.
They don't seem to recognize good versus evil. I'll say that. I must agree with you there. Thank you so much for the call, Bob. I appreciate it. So is the mayor of Minneapolis, is Jacob Frey, indicative of the fact that the Democratic Party is broken? And is it fixable at this point, given that was the response to a school shooting? That was don't pray and let's get guns. After weeks of being on the sides of criminals, that is what we got from the Democratic Party. Can they get fixed at this point in time? And what they did yesterday, did that make it worse? Did coming out for a political issue before the smoke had cleared from the gun, before the bodies had cooled of the dead children, did that make it worse for them? And can they possibly fix anything at this point in time? Let's go to Rose in Norwood. Rose, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
Morning, Sandy. I'm doing well, thank you.
So what do you think, Rose? Have the Democrats just broken themselves into a million little pieces, and did they help themselves at all yesterday?
I don't think the Democrats can help themselves at all anymore, because they are a broken party and they've lost their common sense and they've lost touch with God and family. That's their biggest problem.
It's certainly up there.
Yeah, exactly. And when politicians come up, anytime an incident like this unfortunate shooting happens, politicians start debating the gun control issue. And it's an issue. So rather than debating, let's look at results. Like, let's look at states that have tough gun control laws, like Massachusetts, New York, and California. And let's look at their crime rate. Is it working?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another point that my 12-year-old son years ago made, he's like, Mom, schools are the best targets because they are safe zones, because the shooters know that there's no one there to protect the children, the staff, anyone who's the parents who are walking in and out. There's no one to stand up to them, so that's their first target.
You know, and Rose, to your point, in the manifesto that was put up there by the shooter, basically he said that the reason why he picked the church was because it was specifically a no-gun zone. He was making sure that wherever he went to do this, he was thinking about killing these children on a playground at recess when they're going in and out, or, doing a fire alarm, doing something like that. But he chose the church and the first mass of the year to celebrate the beginning of school because it was a no-gun zone. That meant nobody would have a gun to fire back at him. So to your point, that's exactly why he picked the church.
Absolutely. And I don't think gun control is the issue. I think going back to family, going back to prayer, and going back to parental control, not gun control, parental control, through common sense.
Yeah, through common sense. But common sense has been seriously lacking in the Democrat Party recently. I mean, when you look at the fact that they found themselves arguing against crime control for the criminals. I mean, they actually publicly were arguing against crime control. That just it defies explanation, because in what universe is that going to be a popular argument unless you're with, other mentally inflicted people like you are, that you have Trump derangement syndrome to the point where you think it's okay to argue on the behalf of rapists and murderers and against the police officers who are protecting you. And that's where they've been for a couple of weeks until yesterday. And I'm not saying that they're for the National Guard, but all of a sudden they're like, oh, we have an opportunity now to be on the side of law and order. Let's call for gun control before even the smoke cleared, Rose. And that, I don't see how you come back from that. Do you?
Actually, having the National Guard is a deterrent, even if they're not doing anything except just their presence is a deterrent. And we're seeing that in Washington, D.C. So what's wrong with following that example in other states?
Yeah, No, I do not disagree with that. The thing is that legally, the president can bring in the National Guard because DC is a federally protected area. It's unlike any other city in the United States. Federal law is what controls DC. So he has the right to do it in Washington, but he doesn't have that same right in other cities. You have to be invited in by the governor of the state in order to bring the National Guard to some other place, unless you can declare some sort of emergency or there's something that will supersede states' rights. But so that's why you just don't walk into other cities, Rose. But I think the Trump administration is trying to figure out a way to help some of these other cities despite themselves, don't you?
Not be a good image for Trump or any Republicans or any conservatives to be calling for the National Guard to be called into any state without the governor asking for it. But I think these governors need to reevaluate the results that we're getting from D.C. versus the crime rate that they're fighting.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And I think that part of what's happened here, Rose, is that the Democrats have been fit to be tied over the fact that President Trump has been successful in his address against crime, basically, in Washington, D.C. I mean, it's one of his main platforms that he campaigned on is, the addressing of crime that took law enforcement took a huge hit during the Biden administration. And, people were trying to defund the police, no bail, laws were put into effect, and crime has skyrocketed. And the interesting thing about that is that Democrats knew that crime had skyrocketed. And several police chiefs in major cities have gotten themselves into deep crap by lying about the statistics, by bending the statistics to try to show that crime wasn't skyrocketing. But they actually brought up the police chief in Washington D.C. for doing exactly that. But President Trump lives in Washington D.C. and so does the press corps, and the press corps was seeing basically the crime every day and how bad it was, despite the statistics that the mayor's office was putting out. And President Trump has always criticized the blue states and the blue cities for what he called, the radical left policies on criminal justice. And when he brought out the National Guard, while signaling that other cities may be next, the Democrats had to fight that because they have to fight anything that President Trump does. 617-266-6868. This is Sandy Shack sitting in for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. I think the Democrat implosion yesterday over the Minneapolis school shooting, jumping on gun control before we even knew what the death toll was, as well as denigrating prayer, has driven panic in the Democratic Party. It was driven by panic over the fact that the Democrats themselves had put themselves in a very bad position regarding crime, because President Trump had made fighting crime a big issue, and it's been very successful at fighting crime, and they have to be against anything that Donald Trump is against because they have painted him as the Democrat Antichrist. And so that's why, they made some very foolish public statements and positions by saying it was bad to fight crime. And so now they had an opportunity in their minds, I think, to be on the side of the angels and say, oh, we're against crime because, hey, we're calling for gun control. I think that's what was happening. But instead of helping themselves out of a hole, I think they dug themselves in deeper because they are so angry they can't see straight. And why are they so mad? Well, because Trump is successful. He is cleaned up D.C. It's amazing what he's done. Even Mayor Bowser has acknowledged that he has been able to clean up the city. I mean, who would have thought you'd ever see Mayor Bowser admit that? But she did, and she is. And I think they're really angry that he's successful, one. And two, he's also suggesting that maybe he'll take his crime patrol to other cities. Cut number 16, please, Mike.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough. And the people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one. But they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, please, President Trump, come to Chicago. Please. I did great with the black vote, as you know, and they want something to happen. So I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York, and we're going to help with. And I think a lot of these people that you see on television, they are, including the people in this audience, they'll say bad things about me, and then they'll say, thank God he's here, because half of them got mugged, and they don't want to get mugged again.
Yeah. So, and we've heard those stories over and again by members of the press who are stationed in D.C., how they've been mugged. So I think that really angers them. One, he's successful. Two, he's going to take it to other cities. And then he did something the other day, which I think really set them over the edge. And this is that he floated the idea of bringing back the death penalty into Washington as a crime deterrent for murder. Cut 5A, please, Mike.
It'll be a crime-free city. By the way, speaking of that, anybody murders something in the Capitol, capital punishment, capital punishment. If somebody kills somebody in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., we're going to be seeking the death penalty. And that's a very strong preventative. And everybody that's heard it agrees with it. I don't know if we're ready for it in this country, but we have it. It is. We have no choice. So in D.C. and Washington, states are going to have to make their own decision. But if somebody kills somebody, like you could have been killed, very lucky you didn't get killed, it's the death penalty.
You know, those are tough words. Capital punishment for the capital. Do you approve? Do you think that's a good idea? It's the ultimate move in the federal crackdown on crime. And he's using Washington as a test case. You know, he's ramped up the federal law enforcement efforts, and he's trying to establish, forces in each state's National Guard to be ready on short notice. He signed last Monday a crime-focused executive order that included a directive to the defense secretary to organize these plans for the National Guard for the other cities. But then he brought up the idea of capital punishment in the Capitol, which, he's nothing if not a wordsmith. He likes those slogans. And the District of Columbia hasn't executed anybody since 1957 after a guy named Robert Carter was convicted of fatally shooting an off-duty police officer. Now, D.C. had mandatory death sentences for first-degree murders, but that was voided by the Supreme Court in 1972 in a case called Furman versus Georgia, when they found that the death penalty was being applied in an unconstitutional, arbitrary manner. And 4 years later, the High Court allowed capital punishment to be reinstated as long as there were clearer sentencing guidelines. But back in 1981, the D.C. City Council abolished the death penalty. So that's where that's basically where President Trump is stepping in. He didn't outline any specifics, but he called capital punishment a very strong preventative measure. And he says it is a state decision, but in the nation's capital, he can put it. They can have a choice. So traditionally, the D.C. Superior Court handles the bulk of murder cases, and it would be bound by the city code that does not authorize capital punishment. However, the U.S. Attorney's Office, which prosecutes crimes in both local and federal courts, which doesn't happen anywhere else but in D.C., could bring federal charges in many capital eligible cases and seek the death penalty. So they could do an end run around the city council by doing that. And that would be up to U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. So capital punishment in the Capitol. Add that to our discussion. Do you approve of that? Is that a good idea? Is this another reason why the Democrats are so mad at President Trump to the point where they shot themselves, no pun intended, in the foot again yesterday in Minneapolis? I'm Sandy Shack, filling in for Jeff Kuhner. The Democrats jumped off a cliff yesterday after the Minneapolis church school shooting, saying, in the person of Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, we don't need prayers, we need action, referring to gun control. This was echoed across the Democrat universe, and which alienated conservatives, independents, and non-progressives everywhere, I believe. Why would they make such a serious mistake in using the deaths of children within minutes, really, and denigrating prayer at the same time? Why would they do that? Is it because they were made to look so foolish by President Trump's crime-fighting spree that he went on, that he is successful, and they because they hate him so much and are so upset by him that they have to be against anything? If he says the sky is blue, they're going to say it's green. If he says crime is bad, they have to say it's good. Is their illness so deeply rooted that that's what happened? And so they realized that they look like jackasses. Some of them did. Some of them were out there saying, hey, wait a minute, guys, we've fallen into a trap, the words of Chris Matthews. But is that, so they were too quick to jump on Minneapolis as a way of trying to bring their anti-crime cred back up, and instead it backfired on them? I also think that President Trump's suggestion that the death penalty be brought back to D.C. made the dysphoria even worse. And I think that's another reason why they did not think it through yesterday at the Minneapolis, after the Minneapolis school shooting. And the president made the suggestion of bringing the death penalty back for D.C., capital punishment back in the Capitol, during his cabinet meeting at the beginning of the week. And as I said before the break, the D.C. Council controls that, but you can do an end run around them, because the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. can actually bring local crime as federal crime. They can rename it and do it that way, and you do have the federal death penalty. So that's how you would do it. And it would be up to the U.S. Attorney's Office, which prosecutes crimes in both local and federal, to bring it back in capital eligible cases. And it will be up to U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, who is on board with the idea. Cut 400, please, Mike. So we have a little bit of a computer. It seems kind of like a misnomer when we're talking about something serious, but we tend to call it the spinning wheel of death. And it's kind of appropriate in this particular case. But that's what's happening. But Jeanine Pirro has said that we will use all legal sanctions and sentences called for by law. And, okay, go ahead and play it, Mike.
The president said today that anybody who murders somebody in Washington, D.C. will have the death penalty brought against them. Is this something that is going to happen in your office?
Well, absolutely. I think that when the president came in, the Attorney General indicated that we would be seeking the death penalty in appropriate cases. And obviously, there is a whole process that we go through. And a couple weeks ago, with the capital murder, the murder of the two individuals from the Capitol Museum, we indicated what that process is. It's a very deliberative process, but we will absolutely be following the president's directive, and it ultimately is in the hands of the Attorney General, who makes that decision.
So it sounds like she's on board. Are you on board with that? I'm going to make that the poll question today, which you can take at WRKO/Kuhner or on X at the Kuhner Report. And it's brought to us by Mario's Quality Roofing, Siding, and Windows. You can take the poll question is, should capital punishment be brought back to the Capitol? Yes or no? Because I think that's an appropriate question. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Democrats took a header off a cliff yesterday and did something so distasteful as call for gun control before the smoke cleared at the church shooting. At the same time, saying, prayer, God is dead. We don't need your prayers. I think that's what put nudged them over that cliff yesterday. Tony from Florida, do you think I'm right in my assessment, or am I misreading everything?
Oh, Sandy, you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100% on everything that you've said this morning and on this issue. I definitely agree with President Trump. On everything he wants to do. With the capital punishment and everything. So I'm with them, always in lockstep. But Sandy, one of the things you have, with the mayor, he says, we don't need prayer and thoughts and prayers and and then you had actually the legacy media, by the way, Sandy, where as the legacy media, that they're not journalists. These are activists. And let's just give you an example. When you had Strawberry Shortcake, Circle Back Jen Psaki also said yesterday, enough with the thoughts and the prayers. Yeah. And then they want to jump on the guns, Sandy. They want to jump on the guns and say, we got to stop the guns. That's the typical narrative with the left wingers. And then you have, obviously, then they're gonna be protecting the trans community. And I don't even know if I call it a community, because you know what? There are two genders, a man and a woman. Let's face it here. I'm not going to be politically correct. I never am and I never will be. Mm-hmm. But there's a man and a woman. That's all there is. Okay. So they want to protect the trans community. They want to protect part of the manifesto, I think, because of it, just like the Nashville shooter not that long ago in the Christian school. So they want to do that. And then look where it happened. Minnesota. Who's the governor? A governor, Tim Walz, who puts tampons in boys' bathrooms. So look at the source. Look where this is coming from here, okay? And then you can go deeper with this, Sandy, and talk about, this whole Pride Month. Oh, they get the month of June, and they want their trans flags out there. And then they have their pride parades, their drag queen story hours, and then you have these parades where the parents take their kids to these parades, and they think it's funny, right? They think it's, this is great, right? So look at what is being exposed to the children in this country. It's an absolute disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And, so it's just, there's so many layers to the onion, Sandy. I mean, I don't know if we have enough hours in the day, right, for this issue.
No,
really?
There are so many. Every time I turn around, there's something else. And yesterday was one of those days. I'm looking at what happened, and I'm listening to the press conferences, and I'm reading, everything that I can about what happened in Minneapolis. But I'm not believing my ears. First of all, and Waltz, who was supposed to go out and talk, and he did, and he said the right things about, kindness and empathy. I have all of that. And he actually called for prayers. But the interesting thing to me is he kind of caught himself. He almost didn't call for. In fact, I don't remember which one that was, Mike. I think it was the last one of Mike Waltz's cuts. He caught himself like, maybe I shouldn't ask for thoughts and prayers, but then he did. I think it's 410C, please, Mike.
Minnesotans will not step away. We'll stand with this community. We'll redouble ourselves to do the best we can to understand what we can do to prevent any parent from having to receive the calls they received today, from any school dedicated to children having to respond to a situation that, as we said, is unthinkable, but that's all too common, not just in Minnesota, but across this country. It's Minnesota's day today, and it's my strongest desire that no state, no community, no school ever experiences a day like this. So I ask the rest of the folks around the country who are watching, keep us in your thoughts and prayers, but also keep us in the thoughts for action. Keep us in the ideas that we can work together. And it's on these days like this, I think, and I hope we can hold on to it. We are unified as a community. Everybody across the country today is part of the Annunciation Parish, and they're with those families.
So did you notice that, Tony? I mean, he was saying the right things, I think, on many levels. But when he went to ask for thoughts and prayers, he stopped for a second, like, wait a minute, should I do that? Because I don't think it's in the progressive playbook, and he's definitely a progressive. And then right after that, you had the mayor of Minneapolis saying, we don't want your thoughts and prayers. We are talking about how yesterday, appallingly, there was just the behavior by the Democrats responding to the Minneapolis church shooting just kind of floored me. They were standing in the shattered glass of the church while saying, one, don't send prayers, and two, we need gun control. I can't think of anything that would aggravate Americans more, especially those of faith. Why would the Democrats, who are hemorrhaging members and whose voter registration is cratered, why would they make that kind of mistake and aggravate people as opposed to bring people on board? Well, obviously they're tone deaf. They don't understand how Americans think, and I think that was really demonstrated in the last election. But I think more than that, it's just Trump dysphoria. They're just so angry that President Trump has been successful, and I think they were set over the edge when he wants to bring back capital punishment to D.C., which he said he wanted to do while he was in his cabinet meeting this past week. And there's a way he can do it, and without the D.C. Council's approbation. So I think that's what's happened. And I think they thought what they were doing, because they're so myopic, they only see their own desires, that they thought that it would make them appear as if they're on the side of law and order by asking for gun control and they were against crime. It doesn't. It makes them look craven, and it makes them look completely egocentric, meaning they only care about themselves, and they just care about this issue because it's an issue they can use to fight Donald Trump with, because he's on the opposite side of it. I think that's what it made them look like, and I think they made a massive miscalculation yesterday. What do you think, Jack and Danvers? Welcome to WRKO. How are you, sir?
Sandy, thank you so very much for taking my call. Just a quick, brief background on me, very succinctly. 45 years an educator, classroom teacher, principal, superintendent. The majority of my career was within urban, ethnically diverse environments. So I was dealing on a daily basis with student safety, which I always believed to be priority one. And I had to deal with regulations around weapons, whether that be brass knuckles or whether that be a handgun. And ultimately, I was called into a gymnasium in an emergency situation to stand between two students, one shooting a gun at the other, and successfully negotiated that handgun to be relented to be given to me. And I truly believe to this day that the reason the child surrendered it to me because I had a relationship with that student. He knew who I was, he knew what I stood for, and so forth. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, is I just wanted to float two ideas that I do not hear on a regular basis, and then maybe your audience could process them.
Okay.
The first idea is, what is the motivation of those who would go into a house of worship or go into a school? And some people would say, oh, well, there's a whole variety of reasons, when I would say universally, with a background in human behavior, it's always the same motivation. They want a voice. They are disempowered. They want a voice. They're not heard. And they believe that in taking dramatic action like this, they will be heard. So the first idea that I would float is that as a society, as a culture, and as perhaps a policing agency, we need to stop publishing manifestos. We need to stop over-processing within the public forum why these individuals have acted. Again, I believe it's because they want a voice, and we are giving them that voice. We need to stop doing that. Secondly, and you're a lawyer, so I'm going to entrust it to you as to whether it's even feasible, but I have long thought that houses of worship and schools on a federal level should be determined as weapon-free zones. And if we did that on the federal level, there is a fantastic book out that I recommend to everybody. It's called Drive, D-R-I-V-E, written by the author Pink. And it talks about if the consequence outweighs the proposed action, people won't take the action. In other words, if the punishment is swift and proportionate, they'll second guess whether they're going to do it or not. And in this case, I would say to you, we don't need gun control. What we need is if someone attacks one of these vulnerable identified areas with a weapon, they have violated the social contract, and it should be capital punishment. And then I don't mean to sound extreme, but I think you can hear in me the passion that I have for children. If it's going to be capital punishment, we almost should consider the English model of a public execution, where people see, if I'm going to want my voice and I'm going to use weapons as a violence to empower my voice, then I know the consequence is my voice is not going to be heard, and I put my own life at risk.
Absolutely, I hear the passion in your voice, and you have really articulated beautifully your positions on this. I agree with one and I disagree with the other, sort of. The first one regarding the manifestos, I think is brilliant. I completely agree with you. I think they do want to be heard, and I think that's evident by the postings on Facebook. And we take down, law enforcement takes down those postings on social media as soon as they are identified for that reason. And I think not publishing manifestos is a very good response to what we've been seeing lately. On the second one, the weapon-free zones, I like the idea of making schools and churches federal areas so that, you can do capital punishment regardless of what the holding in the state is on capital punishment. But here's the problem with making it weapon-free, Jack. The church where this happened in Minneapolis was a weapon-free zone. It was a no-gun zone, and that's why it was chosen. That's why this gunman chose the church as opposed to the school, which was not a gun-free zone. So he wanted a place where there would be nobody firing back at him. That's why he chose it. So they would not be able to defend themselves. And I think that's the problem with gun-free zones. I don't think it has, it's not it's a magnet as opposed to a deterrent. What do you think of that particular issue?
Follow-up to your logic is, and I'm not playing semantics on this.
No, go right ahead.
If you declare a gun-free zone, how then does it not become attractive to the person carrying the weapon? And the answer is because the federal government is holding a weapon, and they're going to execute you for what it is that you're going to do.
Well, you can do that, but you can do that by just declaring it a federal zone. Just saying federal laws are going to, you don't have to make it a gun-free zone to make it a federal zone. You just declare it a federal zone. So you can have that deterrent without making it a gun-free zone. So I think the problem was this church was chosen because it was a gun-free zone. It was what you want it to be. And that's why he chose it. That's why he shot the gun there, because he knew there would be nobody there to fire back at him. And that's the problem. If you designate areas, most churches or schools, nobody knows if somebody has a gun or not. They're not gun-free zones. You just don't know. There could be, there couldn't be. The odds are there isn't, but you don't know for sure. And so, but he chose the church because it was labeled a gun-free zone. So that did not help anybody. And I think that you can find another way. Maybe you just make all churches, for the point, you'd have to pass legislation, obviously, but you would make all churches, under federal jurisdiction for a crime. Maybe it has something, I don't know how you would do it or who wants to do it or how you would, go about doing that, but it would have to be congressional legislation that does that. But you could do it that way, Jack. And so you can have your deterrent without having your magnet.
Processing your thoughts, I'm thinking that the legislation could define that it's a weapon-free zone, meaning someone from the outside could not bring one in, but that would not, under regulation, prohibit maybe the church or the school from having, like in schools, a safety officer with a firearm so that they know that there is an immediate consequence for going into school.
The problem is that the gunman is not going to pay attention to the sign that says no guns in regard to carrying guns. So what purpose does it serve? If you're saying it's a no gun free zone, you're just telling him that most of the people there aren't going to have guns. There might be a policeman there might not be. Why do that? Why set that in his head as this is a group of sheep that I can mow down with my gun? Because that's what that does. And so, that's why it doesn't serve a purpose. It just doesn't. You can find another way to make capital punishment applicable without making it a gun-free zone. Gun-free zone did not help anybody in Minneapolis. It didn't help anybody. So I don't see the purpose of doing it when you can get the same deterrent that you think should apply by not doing a gun-free zone.
And one last closing comment. It's not random. It has to do with what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to go to Tokyo today,
Yeah.
you would be shocked to know that 3.5-year-olds are walked to a subway every morning because they're required to go to school. And on the subway trains, there is a designated car with 2 or 3 monitors, and 3 to 3.5-year-olds get on that subway car every morning and go to school safely.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting, right? That a
It
culture
Yeah.
has preserved the obligation, if you will, to minor children.
Yeah.
That the response to someone having anything to do with attacking that car is so incomprehensible that the children are safe.
I think that is an amazing thing, a very interesting statistic and a very interesting piece of information. Thank you so much for that, Jack. It does make us think about what more we could do here to make life safer for not just our kids, but for everybody. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate the call. Let's go to Frankie in Canton. Frankie, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Frankie?
Loving life. I think what Jack was just getting at was he was talking about like a militaristic style policing right there, which I don't know, good and bad, I guess, if you trust your leaders. But
Yeah.
I don't know. That kind of throws out the whole liberalistic idea of community policing.
Yeah, it does. Although it seems to work in Japan for that car with the kids. I find that fascinating that you can do that.
In a world where we could trust our duly elected officials. So what I did have to say was there is a relationship I was seeing from like sex trafficking and, the Democratic Party. And it's kind of bizarre, but when you look at, if you have any conversations with the pimps, what they look for. I had a conversation with one of them, and he told me the first thing I look for in a woman is intelligence. And if she doesn't have that, she's mine. So that's why they target children. And it's kind of like what the Democratic Party is doing. They're indoctrinating our children through our school systems, brainwashing them. And so when they're, oh, yeah, you can do this, they're exposing to all these things, normalizing them. And it's like, well, why are we going to vote for these people? So they start out being like, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, you have to do this for us. This is normalized for us. And then they just have these voters for life.
Well, I think that was true, and I think that's exactly what their plan was. I think you put your finger on it, but I also think that it's not working as well as they thought it would, because hence the last election when a lot of younger people voted for Donald Trump, because no matter how well indoctrinated you are, and absolutely it works great with some people, I think you have other people who become thoughtful, and when their lying eyes tell them something different than what they're being told, they start to ask questions. And so I think, like you said, the more intelligent they are, as they grow up, their own intelligence starts to assert itself. And some are asking questions. And I think that's what's happened and why there's been a huge shift in the party bases. And Donald Trump has been successful. And these people who were indoctrinated can see with their own 2 eyes and hear with their own 2 ears the things that he's doing that are successful, regardless of what the Democrats say, regardless of what legacy media has been telling them. And I think that's why there's, why the Democrats are hemorrhaging voter registrations. I mean, they are like, it hasn't been this bad in decades and decades and decades for them, and they have hit bottom. I think there are many reasons for that, and one of which is they don't understand that they come across as tone deaf. And I think yesterday, Frankie, was a big example of that. Coming out after a school shooting and saying, we don't need your prayers, we need gun control, while the ambulances are still pulling away from the church, is just shocking on so many levels. Whether you're a Catholic or not, it was like, what? And and that tone deafness is what's alienating those people that they used to be able to count on, I think. Don't you think?
Anymore. And I think that's the reason that they are so anti, Christian faith. I'm a pretty okay Catholic myself. I go to Mass on Sundays, but, that's why they don't want it. If you look at the younger generation, I mean, God bless, I'm stoked about it, but young men are voting more and leaning more conservative. Young men are also believing in Jesus. It's like, it's a crazy coincidence, but family values, it's like, back to the whole, child trafficking thing, they're looking for, one of the things that they look for is, what does that person's father look like? Is he a scary guy? If he's not an intimidating guy, well, I think that's an easy target for me. Oh, there's no father. We don't have a family structure. That's what they don't want. That's where the Section 8 housing and all that stuff comes in, I think. But I think that's why they want to. They're following the same playbook as like the pimping playbook or whatever you call it.
Yeah. That's an interesting analogy. I think it really is, Frankie. Yeah, I think it did work at one point. I just don't think it's working as well, and they haven't evolved past it. They can't get past it because I don't think they have any leaders anymore. Remember Kamala Harris was asked when she went on with Stephen Colbert, basically, who's the leader of the party, and she couldn't give an answer. She could not give an answer. Her response was, there are many leaders. She couldn't name a person. I could name one person that would be arguably the head, but she couldn't. And, wow, that is another part of the problem. So ineffectiveness, no leadership, these are the things that they can't seem to get past. And they're enraged by their own malfeasance, I think. And they're using Donald Trump as the scapegoat for anything that they've done that's been a huge mistake. And so everything he does now enrages them instead of looking in the mirror and saying, how can I evolve? What can I do differently? And that's to our benefit, Frankie, at the moment, because it means that they're being exposed for the non-thinking, self-absorbed politics that they've been putting forth for a while. Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to Zach in Stoughton. Zach, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
I was wondering if I could go a little deep. Sometimes I don't make much sense, but I have all these thoughts running through my head.
Okay.
I was probably, about the age of the kids that got shot up in that church yesterday where the movie Exorcist came out. And, as I remember just kind of questioning so much about, like, I always thought that life was just so peaceful and happy. And then all of a sudden, and I started to have to question, like, is there a devil? If we believe in Christ, we're supposed to believe in the devil. And, it's funny, you see, the sadistic church up in Salem, and you see all these different things depicted with Satan, with breasts and a muscular body. And I just feel like we're fighting more than we even can imagine. And, religion missing in our world is so important. It's just so important. And, with these kids and they're looking for something and they're not getting it from our society anymore. And, that last guy saying that, capital punishment, they're killing themselves. And that just shows how much the mental disorder we have going on, too, without our morals and values and 10 Commandments and stealing and everything like that goes along with a lot of these political people that just have no problem ripping us off. And
well, the breakdown of laws, Zach, the breakdown of, like, I think exactly what you're talking about was happening when you had this whole slew of progressive DAs voted in who didn't prosecute what they called, low-level crimes like vandalism, like shoplifting, and then you have a further breakdown from there. So I think that goes along with what you're talking about, and then Donald Trump comes in to fix that, to fix all that up, and I think that's part of their anger, is that he's rolling back these policies that were eating away at the fabric of our society. And so they're making these strange plays in order to try to get back the power that they had. And I think it's backfiring on them, don't you?
Putin must have said when they got off the red carpet, he probably said, "Oh, Obama, Joe Biden would have brought some transgenders." You know, it's almost like the rest of the world is watching us too, and it's like, you know, when people, you know, like Seth Moulton and anybody even comes out about any sort of pushback on this topic, it is, you know, a backlash across the wave. It has to be something that we have to take a look at as a society, because, you know, when Donald Trump says there's a man and a woman, it's basically like he just wiped out a percentage of kids that are sitting in front of their computer in the basement, that he just killed them in their own crazy mind. He just said, no, you don't exist. And they truly probably believe the mental deficiency of these people, that he just killed them, you know. And that's where I think a huge amount of this anger is coming from, you know, that we're not recognizing them, you know.
Yeah, I don't think that it's that they think that Donald Trump has killed them. I think they believe what they're told by legacy media and activists and the progressives, that Donald Trump has killed him. I don't think they would have thought that Donald Trump did anything. I think they've been told that he's the Antichrist and he's the guy. So I think you're right, and I think it's a put up job. We're talking about how, in their zeal to appear on the side of law enforcement after weeks of denying that cities were crime infested, they made the Democrats made a huge tone deaf error and called for gun control. Oh, and by the way, don't bother to pray for the victims while the wounded were still being transported to the hospital. One caller had an interesting suggestion earlier, and that was that churches and schools be federal zones, so that the death penalty could apply no matter, you know, what the death penalty policy of the state was. And I found that to be very interesting, and so did some of the texters. Although one texter pointed out something that I thought was pretty interesting. And 774 says, and the text number is 70470. And 774 says, Sandy, capital punishment is not going to deter a person who is going to shoot themselves. And that's exactly right. Of course, if their end game is to die before they leave, no, they're not going to care. It's a capital punishment zone. But it might deter those who think they could get away, those who don't intend dying in it. And President Trump wants to bring capital punishment back to D.C., and he wants other states to think about it. Do you think that that's a good idea? In recent months, the Justice Department has said that there are at least 3 cases in D.C.'s federal court that they might seek the death penalty on. One of those is the Elias Rodriguez. He's the guy who's accused of shooting the 2 Israeli embassy staff members who were leaving the Jewish community event. And they're also actively considering seeking the death penalty in D.C. District Court for 2 Mexican nationals who were charged back in 2008 in a gang case and was recently brought to the U.S., and for 2 young men who were indicted for a 2023 carjacking that these all resulted in death. But you may be asking yourself, you know, well, it's working. They're doing the death penalty in federal cases, so why change? Well, a couple of reasons. One is that what President Trump is suggesting is having the district attorney for the head district attorney, the one for the federal level, that's Jeanine Pirro, can do something no other acting attorney can do, and that is she can charge both local and federal crimes as federal, and that would apply the death penalty. And so he would like her to do that, was what he was signaling. And here's the thing. The federal death row is down to 3 people right now. And the reason why is because President Joe Biden commuted sentences of about 36 federal inmates who had been sentenced to death. So, or he did, or the auto pen did. I'm not sure who did, but somebody did in his administration. So if you activate the death penalty, you know, and get it moving again, then you're not going to have another administration coming in and letting these people out, which is what happened. And President Trump has vowed since the first day of his administration to restore the use of capital punishment in the U.S. And so by directing the Attorney General to pursue the death penalty for crimes whenever possible. So he wants to make that a real issue in D.C. and that would make the states think about it. Capital punishment is still legal in about, I think, 24 states, thereabouts, in the U.S., and he would like it to be on the table whenever anybody commits murder. And the federal government can call for death sentences over more than murder. They can do it over several crimes, including espionage, murder by drive-by shooting, which means, it can be an accidental death in that respect, genocide, when you have when the offender is a U.S. national, and first-degree murder. Those are basically where capital punishment comes in. And on his first day in office, President Trump signed an executive order that urged the U.S. Attorney General to pursue the death penalty for cases involving murder of a law enforcement officer as well, or a capital crime committed by an illegal alien present in the country. So he added those. But here's the thing about federal cases. If a federal case seeking the death penalty needs to be approved by the Attorney General, that's according to the DOJ, and then the DOJ reviews the case based on a particular group of people in the capital case section, and then they make a recommendation to the AG whether to go ahead and seek the death penalty. And then there, you also have, say the case goes and it is a capital case, the jury still makes the final decision at a sentencing hearing. So, there's a lot of backstops. It's not just, hey, we're going to go for the death penalty, period. That's not what happens. But President Trump is trying to put the idea of the death penalty on the front burner so that states think about it. And with these backstops, doesn't that make it more palatable for people? So do you agree that the death penalty should be brought back to D.C.? Is this something that would be a good idea, especially if you think about other states maybe reconsidering it? Look at California, the Manson family. They were originally given the death penalty, but California revoked the death penalty and many years ago. And so therefore, members of the Manson family kept coming up for parole. And my response every single time was, their gift is that they're alive. They should be dead because they were convicted and a jury gave them the death penalty for what they did. So to me, there's no such thing as life without parole because these people keep coming up. The Menendez brothers just last week had parole denied, who brutally murdered their parents. And so, they should have gotten the death penalty. So the death penalty is something that needs to be discussed. And I think that's what President Trump was doing when he mentioned it earlier this week and making it a focus in D.C. because he can do it in D.C. as he can't do it in the other places. Other states have to deal with it. It's a state right. They have to consider it unless it's a federal crime. So I think that's one of the things that pushed the Democrats over the edge. The idea that President Trump was bringing the death penalty back for discussion and made them panic a little bit in Minneapolis yesterday. But okay, I say let's talk about the death penalty then. President Trump wants capital punishment in the Capitol. Was that a bridge too far for the Democrats? And does that explain them basically making fools of themselves yesterday by saying, don't pray for us and we need gun control? And do you agree that maybe President Trump's pro-crime or pro-crime fighting, I should say, is what is causing them to behave irrationally? And what do you think about bringing the death penalty back to D.C.? Is this a good idea? Do you like it? He wants to be on the table to discuss for different states because the death penalty is a state issue for local laws. Do you agree? Should we be discussing it? And should the death penalty come back to the Capitol? Janice in Melrose, welcome to WRKO. How are you, Janice?
I heard a very interesting interview over the weekend by the crime specialist John Lott, and he talked a lot about mass shootings, which was interesting timing.
Yeah.
He said that first of all, they plan these for a long time. He was asked why do they want to take other people with them if they're suicidal, and he said first of all that either most or all of these shooters are depressed. They feel like losers. And he has studied all these cases and read their manifestos. They write about how they're socially isolated. Girls won't go out with them. They don't have relationships, and they want to die. And they study all the other mass shootings, and they think that what they want is notoriety, and they get that by the more people that they can kill. And he said in Sandy Hook, he planned this for 2 years, and he wanted to kill more people than that shooter in Norway, I think, which was the highest death count.
The one on the summer camp island? Yeah.
That. Yeah. But the reason that they seek out gun-free zones is because they don't want to be stopped before they can kill the most amount of people they can kill.
Yeah.
And so the death penalty in this case, I don't think
it wouldn't have stopped him. No.
But he said most of them are depressed, and this is their goal. He thought that the best way to, I don't know, deter it, but to help was to have concealed carry adults in the school. And he said that if there's one armed guard, then they'll just wait till he leaves the area or goes to another building. And if they do come into the school, then he's the first person they're going to try to take out. He just thought that concealed carry would be the best thing. But
I tend to agree too, which is why actually which is my argument earlier when we had the earlier caller saying that the church should be a gun-free zone. It was a gun-free zone, and that was part of the problem for exactly the reason you just said. And but I think if you don't know if they're concealed carry, then you think twice. You think twice about using a gun. You think twice about what you're doing. Maybe there's another way for you to get your point across. I don't know. I mean, that these are sick minds to begin with that are thinking about this, but I think that's a really interesting fact, Janice. Who is this again? Who was talking?
The crime expert, but he studied this a lot. But your the former educator you had on, I think he was talking about a different situation. It was a fight between two students. I don't think they were suicidal. And
no, he was talking. Yeah, but his point in bringing that up was to say he'd had personal experience in dealing with guns. He wasn't saying that would have helped that situation. No, he's a very brave man who was brilliant at bringing that situation to a close. I don't think he was saying that schools should be a gun-free zone for that reason. Kids aren't supposed to bring guns anyway, whether you make it a gun-free zone or not. None of the kids are supposed to be packing. So I don't think he meant that as a deterrent for that situation either. I think he was trying to think about what would help people in a mass shooter situation. But I think that the guy you're listening to, and the point I was trying to make with him before, is if they don't know if people have guns or concealed carry, then they might be less apt to attack. Do you remember there was a shooting in a church in Texas, and it was brought to a pretty quick end because there were people who had concealed carry, had guns in the church. It was Texas, and fired back and ended the gunfight before too many people were hurt. And I think that's the point that the expert was trying to make, is that if you don't know, you're not going to pick that church because you don't know. And in Texas, I think, you never know. But in Minneapolis, where a big sign that says gun-free zone on the front of the church, he knew he was safe. I think that's what happened, Janice. But what did you think of the response of the mayor when he says, don't pray for us?
Well, this is just my opinion, but I think there are a lot of cultural Marxists, and anti-religion is, they want the state to be your God, and I think that's why they're anti-religion. But that's just the way I see it. But
no, I completely agree with you. That's the point I was trying to make earlier, and you put it very well. I think that's exactly what was revealed to us yesterday by Mayor Jacob Frey. Thank you for the call, Janice. I appreciate it very much. Let's go to Chris in Tewksbury. Chris, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
I'm not doing that bad, ma'am. I was wondering, we should, I'm sorry, we should bring back Old Sparky.
Okay, so you not only do you want the death penalty, you want the electric chair.
Correct.
Uh-huh. So you're a big yes when Donald Trump says, let's bring it back to D.C.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. it's the same rules here, by the way, in Massachusetts. You can have the death penalty here if it's a federal case. Hence, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, a marathon bomber, is on death row, even though he was tried and convicted here in Massachusetts for a crime that happened here in Massachusetts. But it's a federal crime, so the death penalty applies. Otherwise, if it were a local crime under Massachusetts state law, he would not be. So, okay. Well, thank you for the call, Chris. I appreciate it very much. Let's talk to Ken in Rhode Island. Ken, welcome to WRKO. How are you today?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
Well, I am fine, too. What did you think of President Trump wanting to bring back capital punishment to D.C., one? And two, do you think that's what put the Democrats over the edge, so they made these huge mistakes yesterday?
I kind of agree with President Trump on this. The death penalty is a great deterrent. If you're going to go out there and you're going to, kill a 17-year-old or, God forbid, some of the older citizens out there, you deserve to, sit there and get 200 volts zapping through your body. But I think the one other thing that people are missing here, and I told your call screener this, is the fact that people have been voting Democrat for God knows how long. This goes back to their parents, their grandparents, and maybe even their great-grandparents, for all I know. But, in Rhode Island and especially in Massachusetts, it's like there are no, there are very few Republicans in office. So, now we've got people who will not fight against crime instead of having law and order Republicans up there.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think that voting Democrat for a very long time has been a habit for many people, but I think that is changing. And I point to myself as an example. I came from a family that were a long line of Democrats, but my family's Democrat Party is not this Democrat Party. It's completely different. And about 15 years ago or so, I looked at this and went, I am not a Democrat. And I became unenrolled. And that is, in fact, the biggest growing section of politics, basically, in Massachusetts, and I think in the country, are the independents, which we call unenrolled here in Massachusetts. So I think there is hope that habit is being broken as people actually see what is happening around them and seeing the failure of the Biden administration in particular and the successes of the Trump administration have made a lot of people think about things that they took for granted and positions they took for granted and party affiliation, which they took for granted, which I don't think many people are doing anymore. Our text number is 70470 on the text line. 617 says, Sandy and Mass, a guy named Gary Sampson was scheduled for execution for killing Jonathan Rizzo and two others on an interstate crime spree between Mass and New Hampshire. He answered federal murder charges. He died in jail when Joe Biden was president. We never really heard if he was executed or died naturally. He even had a second death penalty jury affirm his execution. This is the kind of thing that President Trump, I think, is trying to make sure stops happening. And there was another case, I don't remember what state it was. It was just last week I read about it. A man was at the killer of his wife was at his execution. It had taken over 30 years to get there from the time she was gruesomely murdered and assaulted to the time of the execution. And I think these are the reasons why President Trump wants to increase the conversation on the death penalty, and he's done so by suggesting that capital punishment come back to D.C. Do you agree? Should it? And the other side of that was him mentioning that, him bringing that up. Was that the last straw for the Democrats who jumped off a cliff yesterday in their haste to prove that they were for law and order after being against it for weeks? And so instead of, being supportive of the anti-crime policies of President Trump, they decided to start politicking for gun control on the actual scene of a mass shooting while the crime tape was still up. And just for good measure said, by the way, don't pray for the victims. You got to do gun control. I mean, this raises Trump dysphoria to a whole new level. Do you support, Dave in Vermont, do you support capital punishment? And am I right in reading the Democrats' response to that?
I do support it. A question. I've noticed a lot of times, it seems like some of these people that transition in their sex, when they get on the hormone therapies, they seem to get very angry and they seem to be very anxious people. Are these hormonal drugs a controlled substance?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you as a woman, hormones can affect a lot of things in your life. And, if you are born a woman, you learn to deal with it as you grow up because you adjust to it. I would think that if you weren't born a woman and start taking female hormones, that there has to be some adverse effects, but I'm not a doctor and I don't know for sure. I would have to ask a medical doctor to weigh in on that and ask that. And I don't know if they're a controlled substance.
The reason I ask is when you fill out a form to purchase a firearm, you have to have a federal check. Mm-hmm. And that federal check, one of the questions you get on that form is, do you use narcotics or controlled substances? And basically, if you are using a controlled substance that is sort of a psychotic type or anything like that, mm-hmm. You can't get a permit. You cannot purchase a firearm. If these were classified as a controlled substance that was mind-altering, which, their mind's altered already because if they're going to transition to another sex and mutilate their body, they're not thinking quite right. If that was the case, that we could probably keep firearms out of the hands of a lot of these people that seem to be going nuts lately.
Well, I think you could keep firearms out of their hands if they're legitimately getting firearms, but if they're buying them through illegitimate means, if on the black market, or not going through the proper channels, then that's not going to make a difference. So I think what you're saying makes a difference for law-abiding spree shooters who get their guns through legal means, but it doesn't help us if people who are going to buy guns on a black market aren't going to pay attention to, don't really care what the federal laws are. But I get your point, and maybe it would in fact cut down on transactions, and people would have a more difficult time finding guns on the black market. So, point well taken, Dave. Thank you very much. Let's talk to Rob in Seabrook. Rob, welcome to WRKO. How are you?
Sandy, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
I 110% support capital punishment, and I'll take it a step farther because it's a deterrent and it works. The good old firing squad. That will make people think twice, no question about it in my mind. And concealed carry, I believe New Hampshire has that and is one of the safest states in the nation. And I support the show. I support you. I like your call in when you step in for Jeff.
Thank
With
you.
that said, may MAGA live strong and forever. Rubio, Vance, 2028.
Okay. Well, Rob, I think you got everything out there that you needed to in very short order. I thank you on behalf of Jeffrey, and I thank you for myself.